It's Star Wars Day and I sculpted a Lego Darth Maul out of polymer clay. Let me show you how I did it. I started by cutting out a block of clay roughly the size of his legs, and then I cut a little slit down where his legs would be to separate them. Then I cut out some pieces of clay to help bring some shape to his legs. When I've gotten that piece cut out, then I take my tool and I start to smooth it out and shape it and round out the top part of his legs to create that rounded area of the Lego leg. Once I'm happy with that leg, obviously I can't leave this leg undone, so I repeat that same process on the other side. Now to create that area right where the legs connect and bend, I use my little hook-shaped tool to make the lines that would indicate that that piece exists. Then I repeat the process on the back. So after studying some of my kids' Lego people, I realized this joint piece is rounded, so I use my little spoon tool to help round it out. Then I top off the pants with this rectangle piece and blend it in to create that belt area. I use my needlepoint tool to help really blend it in nicely and make sure that it's really attached to the legs. To make the body, I take a trapezoid type shaped piece of clay and I put a little bit of bacon bond to help attach it to the pants, and then I blend it in the same way I did with that belt area. To make sure that that joint area in the leg really looks right, I use my needlepoint tool to create where those legs bend. Moving on to the head, I take a little flat pancake shaped piece of clay to create the neck and I blend it into the top of his shoulders. Then I take a cylinder piece to create the head. Then I take my hook shaped tool and blend that into the neck. Now Darth Maul has a piece that looks like it attaches to his Lego head that holds his horn, so I create the line to show that that's where the attachment is, and then I attach the horns to his head. Once I had his head finished, I use a little ball-shaped tool to create his little butt circles that would help him sit down onto a Lego piece. And before I put him in for his first bake, I take a little piece of wire and I stick it right through his shoulder blade area to create a little bit of bones for his arms. And then I blend that in to make it look nice. Now that he's baked, I take a little bit of clay and I wrap around those arm bone wires that I made, and then I blend it in and make it nice and smooth in the shape of a Lego arm. For this particular pose, I'm doing one arm down, one arm kind of up, and this arm is going to be holding his dual lightsaber, so it's going to be sticking out a little bit farther out. Once I'm happy with the shape of his arms, I create a little flat edge right where his sleeves would go, and then I put him in for another bake. For his hands, I will be using cosclay because it is a little bit more flexible than sculpey clay, and I really wanted the lightsaber to be removable like an actual Lego would, and the cosclay would allow the hand to bend slightly enough to allow him to remove it. To get the shape of his hand, I took the cosclay and I wrapped it around one of my tools to help me shape it out to the perfect shape. And just to make sure that I am close to the right shape, I check a little Lego minifigure and then I adjust accordingly before I attach it to his arm. One of the great things about cosclay is that it can really hold its shape once you've shaped it into the shape that you want it to be shaped in. Once I have my Lego minifigure shaped hand, I use some Bacon Bond and I help attach it to the wrists and I blend it in as well as I can. And I repeat it on the other hand as well. Once I feel confident that his hands are nice and attached, I put him in for his last bake. Now that he is done baking, I take a small piece of wire that will be the length of his dual lightsaber and I cover it in a thin coat of cosclay. Here it's still a little bit too thick, so I have to thin it out, but then I bake it and get it ready for the details. Look at how it just pops right on. So after I had baked him and I put the dual lightsaber in his hand, I realized I don't like the position of his hand. So I take an X-Acto knife and I just kind of cut it to help reshape that hand in the position that I want it in. Once I'm happy with its position, I add a little bit more Bacon Bond and I bake him one more time while I work on his lightsaber. His lightsaber has two edges on both sides of the hilt. So I am making the first one and blending it in as well as I can and then creating a thinner area right below it with my spoon tool. I repeat the same process on the other side of the hilt. Based off on my research, on the middle of the hilt there are two very thin rings that go around the hilt as well, so I create those as smoothly as I can, and then I take some little strips of clay to create those little embellishments on the base of his hilt. Now that he is fully baked, I give him a complete base coat of black to start off with, since he is mostly black and gray colors. While I let the black paint dry, I paint his hilt a nice shiny silver and then the lightsaber ends a bright red color. Once the black base paint is dry, I take a very tiny brush and some red paint to create the very tiny details of his Zabrak face. I was originally going to plan to make all of the shapes around the black, but I was having so much trouble getting it to fit, so I just painted the whole thing red and I'm going to add the black detailings on top. While I let his face dry, I add some red paint to his chest area to create the detailings of his chest. This part here down on the lower end, I made it way too low and I ended up having to redo it so I could push it up a little bit higher. With my very tiny brush, I start to add in all of those black Zabrak detailings to his face. Really make sure that the yellow of his eyes pop. I start by giving it a base coat of white. Then I paint the yellow on top of that once it's dried. Next, I add a little red rim around the base of his eyes and then finish him off with the black pupils. Moving on to his clothes detailings, I use a mixture of dark grays and light grays and silvers and just try to recreate the lines that I see on the Lego Darth Maul that I have been studying. Some of these details are so small and I am not used to painting this small detailing, so it is definitely imperfect, and I'm realizing that this small project that was supposed to be simple is not in fact a small simple project just because of the paint detailing. Next, I move on to his back, which was kind of a nice change of pace because it was a little bit simpler and less detailed to paint. And for the lower part of his legs, I don't know what these are. I'm going to speed right through it because it took me a really long time to paint. It is at this point that I realized that his clothes are technically more of a charcoal gray, so here I am adding in those charcoal gray colors. And then I add the finishing touches by adding some black fine liner detailing. And now that he's done, let's give him his lightsaber and get him ready for the glamour shots. And there he is, Lego Darth Maul. Though he be tiny, he definitely is strong in the Force because I really feel like he kind of kicked my butt on this project. He did give me a little bit of practice into very fine line detailing, and I think I did a decent job with having very little skill in this area. Anyways, see y'all next time. May the 4th be with you, and remember to stay crafty.